What makes people all over America break down and cry?
Hey everyone, welcome to Game Baking, a show where I explain, dissect, and discuss the making of a game every month while I take on the One Game a Month challenge.
No life nerd.
Last month's video was a doozy and turned out to be way longer than I initially expected.
What the fuck?
I had a lot of foundational stuff to explain.
You just talk too damn much.
But this time around, I'll try to be a little more brief. Let's get started.
The theme.
For February's game, I participated in the Brackeys Game Jam. This time around, the theme was Stronger Together, which I find to be quite flexible. You can come up with a lot of different interpretations for this theme, and there are many different ways to approach it and implement it into your gameplay mechanics. I immediately got started on brainstorming and came up with a couple different ideas. You control two characters simultaneously and can split up to solve puzzles. They each have different pros and cons.
You kid. That is the stupidest thing you interpreted there.
You play as a monkey and stack up as you find more monkeys. The taller you stack, the higher the areas you can reach. You play as a leader and have to recruit people to join your group. Kind of like Katamari Damacy, except you're a crowd rather than a ball. Something about transformers and joining together to form a big robot. You play as a tool man who collects sentient tools. Each tool can perform a certain action, so the more you have, the more puzzles you can solve. By that point, I knew I wanted the game to be a puzzle platformer of sorts, where you play in first person. While some of those ideas came close to being what I wanted, I ended up mixing a few ideas to come up with something that finally clicked for me.
The concept.
I ended up landing on a simple adventure game where you control a mob that group up to form shapes like ramps, bridges, and a rolling ball to help you solve environmental puzzles. I figured I could maybe do something similar in concept to Pikmin, where the larger the mob you control is, the stronger you are. That's my implementation of the Stronger Together theme. I had a composer join me this time around, so I thought it might be cool to take advantage of that and integrate a musical aspect to the game. So I used the story of the Pied Piper as my starting point for the game and made the mob you control a pack of rats. This would allow me to use the flute to control them, adding that musical component I wanted. In the end, here's what I came up with. Hello everyone, before we move on to the meat of this video, I just want to make sure that you subscribe to my channel and you like this video, and also, if you like this content in general, please support me on Patreon, and you can join me on Discord if you would like to chat about generic game dev stuff. Okay, bye!
The meat.
I started out by setting up a scene and plopping down a character. I didn't want to have to write a new character controller system like I always do, so this time I just used Unity's default character controller. The component is decent enough, especially if you're just prototyping and your game isn't movement and traversal focused. I then put together a basic test level using ProBuilder and a basic input system using Rewired so I could immediately jump into implementing the Rat AI. I had some really big ideas for this game, so I'm using a lot of built-in systems just to save as much time as possible. Because of this, I decided to use Unity's default NavMesh and NavMesh agent system for the rats instead of implementing something more complex or customized. In order to avoid having the rats stack into each other, I had them pick a random point around their destination. While this was cool, I thought their behavior would appear more rat-like if I made them move around constantly, so I added a timer to the rat controller that updates their destination to a new random point every 2 seconds. I then also made them do a random hop every once in a while using DoTween just to make them more hectic looking. Okay, now it's time to implement multiplayer mechanics. Sorry. I tend to fall for feature creep when I participate in jams that give me more than 48 hours to make a game.
Day 2.
The first rat feature I decided to implement were the slopes, so I went ahead and modeled a simple slope using ProBuilder. Normally, I'd build a system that detects ledges and calculates their height or whatever in order to place the slopes in the right position and rotation. But time was limited and there was no point in building an elaborate system like that, so I just placed points manually at all the places where the slope can be spawned and wrote a short script that checked the closest point within the camera's frustum whenever you press the Become Slope button. I then took a break from programming to start implementing some graphics. I had a very specific look in mind for the game already. I didn't want to use pre-made assets like I did in my last game, so I thought it would be cool to try creating some assets using full motion video or photographs. So I hopped in front of my green screen and started capturing footage of my hands. Once I had all the necessary footage, I opened up DaVinci Resolve to do some quick editing, color correction, white balancing, and replacing the background with a more solid green. Once that was done, I exported each frame of the footage as an individual image for processing. The next step would have been a ton of busy work, but fortunately I was able to create an action in Photoshop to handle most of it. It starts by reducing the resolution, recoloring the pixels based on a palette that I got from LowSpec, which is a fantastic website by the way, adding an outline, and finally removing the green screen background. I ran that action in bulk on all the frames and voila! I also gave the rats the same treatment, but had to write a small script to get the effect I wanted. For the 2D graphic look to work, I had to give them a Super Mario 64 style billboard look that always rotates to face the camera no matter what angle you look at them from. They'll always appear as 2D objects. I also gave them random sizes so there's a bit more variety. I used that same billboard script for pickups like this flute. Next, I started work on the flute playing. For the time being, I just plugged in some simple controls so that when you press space, it switches the player to flute playing mode, which disables movement and waits for you to hit any of the directional keys 4 times. If you hit up, down, it triggers the Become Slope method. I started the day by creating a rat group texture for the objects the rats transform into and turned it into a moving material. It's so crappy looking, but it gets the idea across. I also started playing around with the camera shaders to try and achieve an effect that complements the graphical style of the hands and rats. First using the really great stylizer plugin by Befio, but then switching to something more basic that I found on GitHub. I then created proper arm animations and tied them into the flute playing mechanic. While doing so, I also dropped in the notes and tunes that Travis had composed. I wanted a note to play when you hit each directional key, followed by a matching tune if the notes you put in correspond to a command. The way it all turned out reminds me of playing the ocarina in Zelda Ocarina of Time, and that's really cool. I also added in the music that Travis composed for the levels. Finally, I ended the day by adding the bridge transformation along with its related trigger object, just like the slope. You could finally cross gaps. Hooray! Only one more transformation to go.
Day 4.
The final transformation would be the ball. This one took way longer than expected. It had more intricacies and use cases than I had to account for, so half of my day ended up being spent on that. Here's how I implemented it. I check to make sure the rats have returned to the player first. Once they have, I disable them and replace them with a ball that has a rigid body and a collider. Then I apply a force to the ball so it rolls forward. I wanted the ball to break back into rats once it collided with a wall or a trigger, but I didn't want it to break if it collided with a wall while in mid-air. So instead of using the collision and trigger events, I instead cast 4 ray casts from the ball, one in each direction, and check the angle of the normal that they collide with. If one of the side rays hits something that isn't the player and has a normal angle between 80 and 100 degrees, a ray is immediately cast downwards to check if the ball is also colliding with the ground. If it is, then that means the ball collided with a wall while grounded, and so I trigger the break function. This destroys the ball, respawns the rats, and applies an explosion force on them so they appear to break out of the ball. Oh, nice. Oh, that's exactly what I wanted. I also give them a few seconds of recovery time before re-enabling the nav mesh agent. Up to this point, The flute playing was hard-coded, so I figured I'd switch that out to something a little more modular so I can easily add, modify, and remove note combinations. I updated the class and added a dictionary of note combinations. You simply write out a string to represent the 4 notes using U, L, R, and D as the element's key, and then assign an event as the value. Whenever you play a tune on the flute, the notes you play get converted into a string, like up down would be UD, and the game checks to see if the tune's dictionary contains a key that matches that string. If it does, it calls the associated event stored in the key's value, otherwise it plays a small nope animation and puts the flute away. I also made it so that the music volume reduces down to 25% when you take out the flute, and then all the way down to 0 when playing a tune so you can hear it. I then did a bunch of bug fixes and started putting together the tutorial level of the game. I made it entirely using ProBuilder, and it took a little longer than I'd like to admit. Mostly because I was still figuring out a proper workflow, and I had to do things like create textures, materials, and fix some issues caused by use cases that I hadn't experienced in the test level. I figured that once I nailed down a proper workflow, the other levels wouldn't take as much time to implement. Obviously, I was wrong.
Day 5.
While I didn't livestream that day, I did spend most of it putting together the second level. I initially wanted 6 levels, but after taking double the amount of expected time to put together the second level, I realized that the goal may be unrealistic. So I decided on just 2 levels along with the tutorial. While working on it, I thought it might be cool to have different palettes for each level. But in order to do so, I'd have to customize the textures for each level, since up to that point I had been creating them using the green color palette. But I thought of a better approach. I recolored all the textures to black and white and used a fixed palette shader to replace the colors in the scene by a specific palette based on darkness. Now that the game looks awesome, I had to build all the interactive elements. I started by writing 2 scripts. One is an interactable class, and the other is an activator interface. The interactable class simply loops through a list of activator objects and calls their activate methods when a collider with the appropriate tag collides with it. I then created a whole bunch of activator classes that implements the activator interface. Move an object, rotate an object, move the player to a point, activate a cutscene, activate a camera, trigger dialogue, hide or show an object, end the level, restart the level, play a sound, or trigger an overlay. This made it really easy for me to have interactive elements in my levels without having to write too much new code whenever I needed something new to happen in a level.
Day 6.
Now it was time to work on the
User interface,
also known as the UI. I wanted it to have that old school aesthetic to match the visual style, so I opted for simplistic pixel art frames and borders for most of it. I started by creating a rat counter and then made a frame to use around the dialog boxes. I ended up revising the rat counter to use that same frame instead and also created a pause menu with it. I found this great resource for bitmap fonts on GitHub and, after picking one that I liked, got started on converting it into a sprite font for TextMesh Pro. I had never done this before, so I'm not sure if the approach I took was right, but essentially I wrote a small script that converts each letter to its sprite tag equivalent, and here's what I ended up with. I also added a simple animation system for the dialogue. It was a little janky at first, mostly because I used a coroutine to type out each character of the text like a typewriter, and when words close to the edge would change in size, they'd move down to a new line. So I opted for displaying all the text in one go and setting their alpha to 0, then animating each character individually. And as a finishing touch, I added some Banjo-Kazooie style voice sound effects, because why not? And finally, I used Fmod to add some sound effects that Travis had produced. Fortunately, this didn't take me as long to do this time around.
The final day.
This was it. the final day. While I didn't manage to add in all the levels and final boss I wanted, I knew that at the very least I could have that third level and an endgame cutscene before submission. Then I spent literally forever making the mini golf level. In fact, I'm still making it now, and here's a clip of future me still making that dumb level. Once that was actually done, I put together some cutscenes using photographs I took of myself in different costumes and pictures of my cat. I also created a transition animation to play in between levels. Then, with the little time I had left, I designed a super frickin' awesome logo to slap onto a basic title screen at the start of the game. All that was left to do was build... Ah, great. Just a few minutes left to submit and I was being bombarded by build errors. I fixed them as fast as I possibly could and finally got a build to compile, just in time for sub-
Nope.
Ah crap, again? Why do I suck at compiling on time? Oh my god!
Man, I'm gonna break my monitor, I swear!
Post-jam editions.
So I missed the submission deadline. No big deal, the jams are just motivators. It's the 1 game a month challenge I'm doing, so as long as I don't spend more than 1 month on the game, I'm good. So I took the time to add in the remaining levels I had in mind: Volcano Island, Space Station, and the boss fight. I could go into details for each level, but I'll save that for you to experience yourself. Alternatively, I'll probably be posting a gameplay video up on my channel at some point in the future, so you could just wait and check that out if I post it. I then did some tweaking here and there, improved the implementation of the sound effects, and did some last minute bug fixes. And with that, I can consider my dumb video game complete. Go play it, goddammit!
The ordeal.
Let's talk about delegates and events. No, not these kinds of events. These kinds of events. I used these to decouple classes and components. What is decoupling, you may ask? It's when you ensure that two classes are independent of each other, meaning they don't rely on one another to function properly. This keeps your code modular, scalable, and reusable in future projects. So in this example, the player class is explicitly tied to the rat class. If you want to reuse any of this in another game, you'd need to either bring both of those classes over together, or update the player class to no longer be dependent on the rat class. And if you want more methods to be triggered when call rats is called, then you'd need to add them in there, which not only adds more bloat to the method, but also makes it responsible for more stuff than it should be. The solution to all this? Events and delegates! Or more specifically, the observer pattern.
That's a 10.
Here's what it boils down to. When your class performs a specific action, it broadcasts an event and then moves on with its sad, pathetic little loser of a life. Sorry, got off track there. But yeah, it broadcasts the event, and then any class that is told to listen to that specific event will immediately be triggered when it sees the event. Player no longer relies or depends on the rat or flute classes, and its only job now is to perform the action it is told to perform without worrying whether or not the other classes can or will be able to perform the related actions. So how do you achieve that? You start by writing a delegate, like so. I like to make these static, but it depends on your use case. I'll explain the difference in a bit. Once you have a delegate, you can create a new event, like this. Now, the event keyword here isn't actually necessary, but it adds some useful restrictions which I'll explain in a minute as well. Now that you have a delegate and an event, you can add your listeners. Here's where the static keywords come into play. Making it static means you can access the delegate from anywhere without having to find the object in the scene or assign the player class as a rat property. And now these two methods will be called whenever the call delegate event is invoked. Of course, there are a couple things you can do to improve this code even further. For example, adding a null check on the invoke method to avoid an error if nothing is subscribed to that event. Another thing you can do is unsubscribe from the event when the object listening to it is disabled or destroyed. Oh, and regarding the event keyword, all that does is make sure that the delegate can't be overridden and it can't be invoked outside of its parent class. And finally, you could use actions and funcs instead of delegates and events for a more streamlined approach. Here's a quick image to showcase the equivalents to using actions and funcs. Feel free to pause if you need to read this for reference. And this pretty much wraps it up. Once again, thank you for listening to my rambling, and make sure you like this video and subscribe for more content like this in the near future. It really does help the channel. In the description you can find a link to my Discord server where we chat about everything from art and game dev to media and design. You'll also find links to my Patreon, the game itself, and my Twitch channel where I livestream some game dev every month when I participate in a game jam. And leave a comment below letting me know what you thought of my game if you played it.
If you like this devlog, then subscribe to this channel for more, and maybe give this video a like.
Thank you, and see you in the next video.